The Starr and D'Amico Show is brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. If you're looking for quality gear without overpaying, shop cheapesttshirts.ca. Huge selection for men, women, and kids. Tees, hoodies, headwear, bags, and more. Proud Montreal business. Order today, ship today, delivery tomorrow. That's cheapesttshirts.ca. Local, fast, and affordable. Brought to you by instacustoms.com. Do you need custom gear from a local Montreal business? Instacustoms.com has you covered. Custom shirts, hoodies, hats, and more made your way. Fast turnaround, great quality, and proudly Montreal-based. Check out instacustoms.com. Brought to you by Cabletel. For trusted alarm systems in Quebec and Eastern Ontario, choose Cabletel. Over 20 years of expert installation and top-tier protection for homes and businesses. Check out Cabletel.com. Email them info@Cabletel.com. It's Cabletel. Peace of mind you can count on. Brought to you by Little Bear. Give your pet the best with Little Bear Pet Supply. It's a proudly family-owned business here in Montreal for over 30 years. Chuck, Evie, and their all-star staff have you taken care of with all the top brands at the best prices, and they really care for your pets. Shop online at littlebearonline.com or visit them on St. Catherine across from Westmount Square. It's Little Bear Pet Supply. Brought to you by McLean's Pub. Head over to McLean's Pub, 1210 Peel Street in the heart of downtown Montreal. Great food, cold drinks, and big games on all the screens. McLean's Pub, good times and great company.
And we're going to be live at McLean's Pub coming up on Peel Street on Sunday afternoon. It is the real deal on Peel. Welcome to the Wednesday live extravaganza, the afternoon after the night that was the Montreal Canadiens. As Hank is beside himself, watching that game with me on the couch yesterday, watching the Montreal Canadiens sleepwalk through the first 10 minutes. But momentum is a very interesting thing, Marco. How important was it? You know, not only we'll dive in deep into the Canadiens' 5-2 win over Carolina, but to leave that period based on how the first minutes transpired, to leave that period simply down a goal. Good afternoon.
Man, I the way that game started and the way that
I don't think
game
you have
ended.
your Shure mic connected this morning or this afternoon.
Really?
Yeah.
I see that now.
Laptop microphone.
Everybody,
There it is.
microphone is in. The microphone is in. Really, the way that game started versus the way that game ended were two very completely different motions. And, you know, I kudos to the Canadiens for being able to fight back and obviously score 5 unanswered goals. I mean, that takes some guts, some gusto against at the time, and still, I think right now, the top team in the East. And, you know, I felt like, especially, you know, we're going to talk about the volume of shots and Canadiens looked and Jakub Dobes. We're going to get into all that, of course. But I think the biggest thing you could take out of yesterday's win, outside of the first 10 minutes, they, in terms of the way that they went about fighting fire with fire, that was the first time I thought I saw the Canadiens intimidate another team. Intimidate another, like, high-caliber team.
The Montreal Canadiens' top line remains one of the most dominant lines in the National Hockey League. All three members for the better part of 3.5 weeks are basically in the top 10 of NHL scoring across the board. Everybody looking up at the great Nikita Kucherov, but Suzuki, Caufield, Slafkovsky. But Marco, we'll dive into Jakub Dobes' career best performance with 41 saves as the shoot from anywhere Canes couldn't really get much past him. After, you know, what was an interesting first period. Poor Mike Matheson, mistake prone, certainly. A couple of incidents involving number 8 yesterday that resulted in the 2-0 deficit. But it was more than the Canadiens' number 1 line yesterday, wasn't it? Oliver Kapanen, Ivan Demidov, Alex Newhook, the Phil Deneau line, Jake Evans line. It seemed like Martin St. Louis got what he's asked for. A little bit more consistent offensive zone pressure from everybody outside of the Suzuki line.
Yeah, I honestly, it's something we've been talking about for a while. If the Canadiens are going to have success, they can't be a one-line team. And I felt like yesterday was the farthest that they've looked from a one-line team in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And not in the sense, because obviously they've blown out other teams. Like we saw them blow out the Islanders 7-3, right? But where I think I felt like the matchups at home, none of the lines at 5-on-5 were ever that I ever feel were just getting outright just hammered. I didn't feel that. And in my notes, you know, one of the things that we see right off the top and I think this is one of the most important things. Puck possession time for the Montreal Canadiens much higher than the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is Canadians, they hold on to the puck until they can make the right play, and they play that cycle game so effectively. Whereas I feel like the Carolina Hurricanes got the puck in a semi-dangerous area, shot. And so it wasn't dangerous. Obviously, they got their own level of puck luck in the beginning of the first period. That Mike Matheson deflecting what was supposed to be a pass, and then Jordan Staal getting a tape-to-tape pass from Oliver Kapanen from the blue line. Like those things are a little different. But what I liked was the attitude, the way they played. Like Josh Anderson is clearly not 100%. He's close, but he still played with his heart on his sleeve. Zachary Bolduc played a great game, in my opinion. The only thing he didn't do was score. But I thought,
so close.
He's really become more and more effective as a forechecking forward. And, you like what you see, and still young. So there's room to grow. I think him and Alex Texier work very well together with Jake Evans. Brendan Gallagher played a good enough game, I think, in my opinion. And again, I keep going back to this, but Phil Deneau is just very, underrated, goes right under your radar. You don't really notice him until you look at the end of the game and you look at the stat sheet and you're like, damn, that many blocks, that good on the face-off circle. Again, these are minute details that become much bigger as you get to this stage of the season. But I don't think we can talk about last night's game without talking about how good the second line looked, specifically Ivan Demidov.
Oliver Kapanen gets on the score sheet again. One of a show favorite, just getting to the net, active sticks in the shooting lane. I want to talk about Jaden Struebel's consistent performance. He's played now 5 straight games. I haven't looked it up, and we don't have a producer, so I'm going to assume that's the first time this season where he's played every game over. It's not. So there's the producer there. He's got the stats, but I mean, what's the number? I mean, if it's got to be close.
I think he's played over. Yeah, you're not far for sure. But
yeah.
I remember him playing I remember there being a time where Arbor Jacki sat for a good 7 to 8 games.
But yeah, I want to talk about the collective defense and whether or not we're comfortable thinking that with a dozen games to go, is this an area that is more or less problem solved? Did the Canadiens have their 3 pairs on defense from here on to the end of the regular season and into round 1 of the NHL playoffs? But the Carolina Hurricanes, why do the Montreal Canadiens have success against this team? We saw them on New Year's Day in that slugfest, goal fest, 12 goals combined against Brandon Bussey in a 7-5 final. We saw Jakub Dobes play there, and last night, the Canadiens, as you point out, I mean, just overwhelmed them. From the second half of the first period, they played a great second period, and then Carolina pulls their goaltender with 4 minutes and change left. That's a long time with the extra guy out there. But what is it about Carolina's game that you think right now this season suits the Montreal Canadiens?
Well, first of all, I don't think Carolina plays an overly physical game. I also think that they don't have the skill to match up with the Canadiens one-on-one, straight up.
Yeah.
I think the Canadiens outskill them significantly in that regard. Where I really think is the biggest difference is on defense. The Canadiens' defense may not be as structured as Carolina. Carolina is a very structured team, but Montreal's defense is, I think, what makes the difference, because when they jump in the rush, man, it is very difficult to contain, and they tend to overwhelm the the team defending against them. You look at that. You look at the Cole Cauffield goal, where I believe it was the Cole Cauffield goal where Mike Matheson went around the net, and then the puck went to Nick Suzuki, and Suzuki shoots, and then it comes to Cole Cauffield, and Cauffield can just put it into an empty net. Noah Dobson's shot, and the way that it's strong enough that it could beat a goalie, but it's well placed enough that it could be double deflected in, and Juraj Slafkovsky scores.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's where I feel it's different. Whereas I didn't get that same jam from the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, granted, Shane Gostisbehere wasn't playing. He's their power play quarterback, understood. But the only defenseman on the rest of that roster that, in my opinion, has an ilk of offensive ability is Alexander Nikishin. And I really liked his game last night as well. But when you lose Brent Burns, when you lose Dmitry Orlov, those players pushed the tempo for them last year and year prior to that. And I just don't feel like they have that element. And then when you start playing a team like Montreal who excels on the forecheck, that was the biggest thing to me. These are two of the best forechecking teams in the NHL. The only difference is the Canadiens withstood the storm defensively from the forecheck from Carolina. It didn't look good at first, but they got better at it as they went along. And then you look at Montreal. Montreal is able to adequately defend the forecheck, but they are elite at executing it themselves. And I think that's the bigger difference, because when you get to the playoffs, you can outwork, outmuscle, or outskill your opponent. Well, the Canadiens outworked and outskilled their opponent last night.
I want to put the question to the chat. We'll get active with a lot of your comments and questions as we move along today on the live presentation of Starr and D'Amico in the aftermath of the Montreal Canadiens' 5-2 win over Carolina at the Bell Center last night. It's on to Columbus tomorrow night. Was that the best combination of a Habs win and an out-of-town scoreboard result? A lot of people point to that. A lot of people point to that Wednesday win in Ottawa. Jacob Fowler, brilliant in that third period, where the Canadiens won that game 3-2 in Ottawa on Wednesday, as maybe the biggest win of the season in the context of division rivalry.
Ottawa would be ahead of them right now if they didn't win that game.
So, yeah, let's put it to the chat. Was that the best combination? Habs win and the out-of-town scoreboard, where it was upset city with Toronto. Toronto, what are you doing beating Boston? I mean, Boston had nothing yesterday in that game, outshot dramatically, and the Chicago Blackhawks taking the Islanders out to the woodshed for a good old-fashioned paddling. But let's pick up on that second line. I mean, does it go back to what you talked about in terms of the lack of physical presence on the Hurricanes' back end? Ivan Demidov, Oliver Kapanen, Demidov's first goal in a minute. The last time he scored a goal was that 3-2 win in Ottawa on that Wednesday, where he had 2 points. Picks up another 2 points, fifth in team scoring. But, I mean, are we at the point where we're saying they hit a wall and now maybe they've gone through it?
I'm a sample size guy. I need more than a game or two to say that they're through it. But you're definitely seeing the instances of a player that is slowly rising above it. So, yes, he scored, but the play that impressed me the most was when he was going one-on-one with the defenseman in the low end of the left side of the offensive zone.
That was crazy.
Just deking him out of his pants left and right, beats him, gets the puck, and then, slides it over for an offensive chance. Like, that to me is what's changed in Demidov. The other thing you have to factor in is the way that he attacks open ice right now, and the way he is willing to take a hit to make the play. That mindset is what allows him to really kind of impact the game a little bit easier, because it creates space for him. And then when you give him that time and space, that's when he gets dangerous. Like that quasi breakaway splitting of the defenseman, offensive chance, we'll call it, came this close to a highlight reel goal. And he did so by attacking with speed, by playing with pace. And I think that's been the biggest thing. With Demidov, he's been able to roll off checks. He's been able to play a little bit more of a two-way game. He's been more intelligent in his placement on the ice. It just hasn't clicked. And one of the biggest things we would talk about, Shaun, was he didn't play fast enough. He wasn't playing with pace. Agreed. Last night, he was playing with pace. Last night, he was all over the ice. He was skating hard. He was, zoning in on the forecheck. He was a very dangerous player because he was playing so quickly. And I think if he is able to add that element where you don't necessarily have to be the fastest straight line skater, but if you can play with that explosivity in your step, that jump in your step, especially when you're playing in that forecheck element, you become so excessively dangerous at this stage of the season, because if you're able to exert that with his hands, his talent, his ability, then you create your own chances. And where have we seen that, Shaun? What is the last player we deemed a unidimensional offensive player that's diversified his game and now gets offense from his defense?
Is it number 13?
There we go.
Mr.
exactly
Every Night, Mr. Every
Mr.
Night,
Every night, and Mr. Every Night, and some nights when his goals aren't bouncing off of Juraj Slafkovsky. But it goes to show you Martin St. Louis' vision for his high skill players is to not only allow them to have an ethical offense in themselves, but to utilize proper habits to help them create further offense through stronger decision making and defense. And I think that element is what's going to allow Ivan Demidov to go from being a first line player to being an NHL superstar, in my opinion.
I mean, I love the word explosiveness when you talk about 93. I love, attacking. It would be another word, attacking the Hurricanes defense, deking guys out, putting pucks on Frederik Andersen, who did not have the best night in goal, kicking out rebounds, kicking it to the hottest goal scorer in Cole Cauffield as he scores his 44th of the season. And while you have me on Cauffield, can I complain about something? Do you have time to listen to me complain about one small thing in the game? Like,
hold on. Let me check with the wife.
Yeah. Hold on. She's busy. He's checking. Can we listen to Shaun complain? Thumbs up.
Yeah,
okay,
we're good. We're good. I got time.
If we're talking about Cole Cauffield as a complete 200-foot player, and everyone in the organization is so proud of how 13 has evolved, and he's more than just his goal scorer. He scores from all over the place. And Juraj Slafkovsky's passing when he should be shooting to try to get Cole Cauffield another goal. Can we put Cole Cauffield on the ice with the goal he pulled for 4.5 minutes? Is that possible? Is it okay for him to score an empty net goal? Everybody wants to see this guy get to 50. Can he get
only
50 goals? Put him out there.
Only ethical goals.
Only ethical goals.
Besides, how else is Jake Evans going to score?
I
love the man. I had to make the joke because he's so good at 6-on-5.
Yeah.
He is really, really precise in his long range shooting. And I give him credit because he got robbed a couple of times over the last few games.
No kidding.
So,
but bro, it's a 2-goal lead. It's not a 1-goal lead. If you can be a 200-foot player on a 2-goal lead, you can help preserve the win. No,
yeah. Listen, I get it. And I get like it's like, oh my God, Cole Cauffield could have had a gimme and he would have been a goal behind, because right now he's at 44 and Nathan McKinnon's at 46, and you're like, oh my God, he's so close. But that's just, the win is most important for Cole Cauffield.
Of course, I wouldn't argue that. I would never argue that. He's very much a team guy. And also, I mean, some compliments to Martin St. Louis. Sometimes who gets thrown under the bus for a variety of reasons. I see media colleagues still lambasting Martin St. Louis because they didn't play Dobes earlier in the season when he was hot, and they're trying to get the 2 goalies going, and people are still complaining about that for some bizarre reason. But he's also, Marco, been a kind of a hands-off coach. He loves the protection of that room. But he was in there in that first intermission. He had some. I don't know what he said, but he was there in that first intermission. I mean, a little bit of a wake-up call. How this team self-corrects, Marco, is one of the best attributes around this team. Is that fair to say this season? They are outstanding in that department.
Yeah, no, they don't go on lengthy losing streaks.
No.
And they're able to bounce back really well. We could talk about the goaltending choices and how that cost. Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, I think adversity leads to the cream rising to the top. What I would say, though, is if you were the Montreal Canadiens, you owed it to Samuel Montembeault to give him every opportunity to bounce back. But at a certain point, you draw that line. And as fans, you may not be privy to dealing with these players as people, but they, as a management team, are. And you could try to be as ruthless as you want, but then don't complain when unrestricted free agents don't want to come here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a balance that you have to have, and you have to be human, and you have to give them an opportunity. And then after that, if you've given them opportunity after opportunity and it does not work, then you can make a decision that is both ethical and that takes the human into account as well, because teams are going to say, well, no matter what happens, they're going to give him the benefit of the doubt at first. They're not going to immediately throw him to the wolves. Look at other high pressure markets. That happens often.
Right.
It used to happen in Montreal all the time. Often. So it's fine in the sense that they are where they are. The Canadiens have lost points this season for far more frustrating reasons, such as
Agreed.
having a goal scored in the last 2 minutes of the game. Last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, against the Anaheim Ducks. Like that to me is infuriating if you're the Montreal Canadiens, not the fact that you went with Montembeault over Dobes or Dobes over Fowler. It's all in the past now. You're in a race and you still control your fate. So that's what they're doing right now. And we'll see what comes of it. But to me, the pieces are in place. The players understand the roles. Now it's about executing and playing a full 60 minutes. If they can do that, I think this team makes the playoffs and makes the playoffs as one of the 3 Atlantic teams.
I think it's fair to say at this point here, Marco nor I ask very much of our loyal and dedicated audience whom we love, and we express that, I think, on a regular basis here. So we're at like 660 people watching the live show now. I'd love to have 660 likes on today's video. And by the way, we're at 14,297 subscribers on the YouTube channel. So golf clap for everybody involved. We're 2 weeks away from the Masters. Marco can't stop asking me about who my pick is for the Masters. This guy's more of a golf nutcase than I am. In case you were wondering, that is sarcasm, by the way.
Okay.
But the march to 15,000 subs on YouTube is so
15.
close. So we're getting close.
I thought it was 20.
We're getting, incrementals of 5,000. You're building slowly. You know what I mean? So hit that like, hit that subscribe button. And right now, Jakub Dobes is hitting all the markers of a number one goaltender. And I wonder with the 4 games this week, it's on to Columbus at the Bell Center tomorrow, on the road, Nashville, and then Sunday, where Marco and I will be live at McLean's Pub beginning at 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon. Please come by and say hi. It's the real deal on Peel, and we'd love to see you there. We've got prizes to give away. Is it an easy decision going into Thursday start time for the goaltender as far as you're concerned? Is there even a debate worth having?
Dobes for me. We had this conversation. If Dobes came in and played lights out yesterday, then I would go back to him on Thursday. And then Dobes, I'd give Nashville to Fowler, and then Dobes again against Carolina.
Yeah,
that was my plan right from the get-go. And then you reassess the next week because I believe they play on Tuesday after that. You reassess accordingly. Maybe you go back to Fowler for that game so as to give Dobes a little bit of a rest after the back-to-back situations, because then there's another back-to-back situation that's on its way that following weekend. So I think you have to temper. He looks great in Jakub Dobes with look at the schedule. 8 games in 13 days. You have to keep that into consideration. And you don't want to leave Fowler out there for too long, but you also want to ride the hot hand for as long as it makes sense. And I think it would make sense, in my opinion, to let him play against Columbus. It's a massive game against Columbus. If the Canadiens can ward off Columbus, at least one of the next 2 games that they play against them, that would be huge in their own playoff run, but it also give them a little bit of a buffer because things are going to start getting a little iffy right now with the Metropolitan Division. If they start faltering and it becomes a little bit like the Pacific, where you're either in the Metropolitan's top 3 or out of the playoffs entirely, that gives the Canadiens a further buffer when it comes to their own playoff push.
Columbus, you're right. They're a wagon since they fired their coach. Rick Bowness has come in. You put a question up. I want to get to it around Sam Montembeault, who was acting as a screen at practice the other day. But just to finish up on, Jesperi Kotkaniemi was a defenseman for the Carolina Hurricanes on their
practice.
Skate. Yeah, at practice, exactly.
Yeah. He was a healthy scratch for the 34th time this season. I think the Jesperi Kotkaniemi experiment is over in Carolina. If they're unable to trade him before the buyout window, because he's under the age, because he's in the right age range, I believe he's going to be 25 in July. They're able to buy him out at 1/3 of his buyout cost, as opposed to 2/3 once you get over the age of 27. So I think it's a perfect time or 25. I apologize. That's the perfect time to buy him out. He would only count for like 800,000 in the first couple of years, and then 400,000 the last 4 years. I think Kotkaniemi is on his way out from Carolina, and then I'll put $2 on him potentially landing in Vancouver as a free agent.
It's funny, we were talking about that and wondering about his future. It's guy's 25 years old, 4.8 on the cap. It's not a bad risk reward play in a second. I want to get to this comment about Sam Montembeault. I just want to address that in a second, if you don't mind. But just to finish our thought on Jakub Dobes for a second, on his rebound control, his composure, he's a lot for a guy who we've often described as being like unorthodox in technique and positioning, all over the place, so to speak. My eyes, I don't think, are lying to me. He just looks a lot more controlled, and I loved his rebound control yesterday. He was seeing shots. He was sucking them into the midsection, not giving a lot of opportunities to Carolina, who were, again, they love to go to the net, that team, and shoot from everywhere.
Yeah, I think that was extremely important because they shoot from everywhere, for him to have a little bit of control in terms of being able to limit those rebounds, being able to, I would say, have more calculated movements. I think we're seeing more and more of that. And it's not by chance. Marco Marciano is really strong at working with Jakub Dobes. His game just consistently improves in that regard. So I tip my hat to Marco Marciano's ability in that regard. One thing that I will say that I think does set Dobes apart from what we saw earlier in the season and from Samuel Montembeault as well in general, the amount of plays that he kills from going behind the net and literally canceling out dump-ins, gaining control and making the strong first pass to get the puck going back the other way, I thought was massive and has been massive over the last couple of games that he's played in limiting the amount of time that the opposition has in the Canadiens' own zone, because dump-in chasing doesn't really work unless you truly hammer it in. Great. Dumping and chasing doesn't work against the Montreal Canadiens when Jakub Dobes is in nets. And it's one of the qualities that made Carey Price so good, is that he would kill the dump in, scan the ice, and the puck would be out first pass the other way, zone exit complete. That's what we're seeing right now from Jakub Dobes, on top of seeing a more structured, a more conservative approach to his movements and his decision-making. And I think there was no better view of that than the opportunity with the empty net, where he got the puck and thought about trying to go for the goal, going for that empty net, and then freezing it instead. Because he had that angle. He had a shot, but there was also the risk that like a Sebastian Aho could have just gloved it down and come back the other way. So, I like the way that you see that maturation in his game.
Finally, let's get to this from Paulie here. Marco asking about Montembeault. Can they waive him and send him to Laval essentially to help them with their playoffs and also to kickstart his career again, preparing for the next season wherever he may end up?
Yes, so the Canadiens cannot waive Samuel Montembeault and send him to Laval after the trade deadline. You can't do that. To send a player to the AHL, they had to have been on the AHL roster as of the trade deadline for that to happen. So the only player that the Canadiens can send to Laval is Jacob Fowler. That's it. And that's, from all intents and purposes, from what I'm seeing right now, unlikely to happen. If and when the Canadiens crack a playoff spot, well, that then whatever, all bets are off. They're going to probably try to rest some guys. Who knows? But as of right now, the only player that could be sent down to Laval is Jacob Fowler. I think we all agree, probably not going to happen. So it is what it is when it comes to those rules. I didn't make them. They belong to the NHL CBA. Yeah. But you can waive a player and pray that another team picks him up. But if the player clears waivers, nothing happens. They still stay on your roster because you can't assign them to the American Hockey League. So it's not like you can get rid of the player. It's not like you save on their cap hit. None of that.
Asked and answered. I'll get to a couple more questions, but as always, Starr and D'Amico pride themselves or ourselves on supporting local businesses, and we thank them for their ongoing support, like Insta Customs and Cheapest T-shirts. Ordered today, and you'll get it tomorrow. Hold on a second. Cabletel.com, the best in home security, and of course, McLean's Pub, the home of Starr and D'Amico. And a reminder, our friends at Little Bear, pet supply store on St. Catherine, littlebearonline.com. It's their spring savings event. You get 50% off, and that rebate is applied at checkout. So get the best for your pets and its needs at littlebearonline.com. Robert Baird goes, question for the two of us. What's the best and worst playoff matchup for the Montreal Canadiens? I am kind of nervous about Tampa Bay in this best of 7 hypothetical here.
Yeah, I mean, the Atlantic Division is not easy.
No, sir. It's heavy.
If the Canadiens finish in the top 3 of the Atlantic, your 2 options are Buffalo or Tampa Bay.
Correct.
Either of those is not ideal.
No.
The most ideal thing is to try to line up with the Carolina Hurricanes. And
Agreed.
finish in one of the wild card spots.
Yeah.
But that may cause a couple of heart attacks amongst Habs fans land, because being in that wild card spot, albeit advantageous because you get Carolina, which I think people would prefer over Buffalo or a Tampa Bay, especially right now. It also means that you're excessively close from being not in the playoff spot. So pros and cons. I'll say one thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to playoff matchups, it doesn't matter who you get in the first round. If they can't beat Tampa, that means they can't get past the second round, because you're either going to play Buffalo or you're going to play Tampa.
Yeah.
So to me,
100%.
Unless there's like a massive upset in the wild card settings. So I feel, and please don't take this the wrong way when I say this. This is me personally talking, not the reporter, the human. But I think worrying about the matchups of who you're going to play in the playoffs is very negative. It shouldn't be about that. If you're that good, then you should be able to beat them. And if you can't beat them, and this isn't a year where the Canadiens window opens, what did you take from that? What did you learn from that? If the Canadiens can go to 7 games against Tampa Bay, even if they lose,
that's massive.
Is that more of a learning opportunity than losing in 5 games to the Washington Capitals? I think so. And I think that until this team has a legitimate number 2 center and a rock solid defensive core, and a number 1 goalie that is established, not just a rookie, I don't think they're there yet. And so that's totally fine. So that it's Carolina, that it's Buffalo, that it's Tampa Bay, to me, I don't think it changes anything. You're going to face a really good team regardless. It's the playoffs. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is not the Western Conference. The East is loaded this year. But I need Hab fans to remember one thing. You're also cheering for one of the top 10 teams in the NHL right now in the Montreal Canadiens. So other teams also a little bit nervous about playing the Canadiens.
Absolutely.
They would also be a wild card in that kind of a situation. So just a little bit of reverse psychology, just to keep into consideration who it is you'd want to play versus who you should play. I'm completely open to seeing any of the series that I just mentioned.
It's funny you say that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I always remember the great Roger Federer, in my opinion, the GOAT, at a commencement speech at a university years ago. In the heyday, when this guy's racking up grand slams, he mentioned how nervous he was. And the one thing that he mentioned was, your opponent is just as nervous as you are, perhaps more so on the other side. Never forget that. Just to Marco's point about, the Canadiens are a pace and offensive team that potentially could be a nightmare matchup for you. And you're 100% on the mark when it comes to learning by losing, learning by going through it, regardless of the amount of games. I think there was a valuable lesson for the majority of the players when they lost to Washington based on the style in which they lost, and understanding that, you can make a strong case that they should be more prepared. And listen,
I think
be careful what you wish for. Carolina's been to the Eastern Conference final in 2 of the last 3 years. Granted, they
haven't won a game during it.
That's right. Exactly. I think they're on 8-game conference losing streak, right? But when you look at the fact that they're experienced,
could be worse.
Is the equalizer Freddie Anderson, Brandon Bussey? What about the Buffalo Sabres? As heavy as they are, they haven't been to the playoffs in 14 years. Are they prepared? Have they been through it? Do they know what it takes to win games? So it's a tough question, but ultimately I agree. I think you're putting undue stress on yourself by worrying about it. Let's settle it when we get there, right?
Exactly. A lot can change. A lot can happen even during a series. We know this. So no sense in worrying about it right now. Just get to the playoffs first and then worry about who you're going to play.
Exactly.
That would be my number 1. Habs chat asks if I have any news on Michael Hage. Is he joining the Habs or is he doing what Higgins is doing? We will have an entire episode dedicated to this exact question based on the information that I've received on tomorrow's episode. So for those that aren't yet members of the channel, subscribe, hit the notification button, because it'll drop tomorrow at 10 a.m. And Shaun and I will be able to go a little bit in depth into A, what the timeline looks like, and B, what the options are, because there's more than just 2 options for the Montreal Canadiens and Michael Hage. And I could tell you that it'll probably be one of the most talked about subjects leading into the month of April. So definitely something you guys should keep an eye out for. We invite you again to like and subscribe just so that when it does drop, you guys get notified tomorrow right away.
Again, on that theme, you want to answer this from one of the members of the Starr and D'Amico show? Michael Hage, not a Hobey Baker. Surf's looking for an explanation and the criteria for the Hobey Baker. Still surprised that Hage was not top 10 after a great season, leading the number 1 seeded team into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's because there were 2 really good options, right? And one of them is called TJ Hughes, noted Montreal Canadiens fan from the great city of Hamilton, Ontario. TJ Hughes is a senior this season. It's his last year of the NCAA. Generally speaking, the Hobey Baker voting doesn't like to include more than 1 player per team. Kind of defeats the purpose if you're the most valuable player, but there's 2 of you on the same team. See what I'm going with this? And so they naturally will give the nod to the older player, the senior or the junior, because it's obviously freshman, sophomore, junior, senior in college. They'll go senior first. And so TJ Hughes being the senior and having the same amount of points as Michael Hage at the moment of the vote coming out, the nod went to TJ Hughes, who had, let's call a spade, a fantastic season. And I would go one further. Michigan has the best center line in all of the NCAA because of those 2. You know, I do believe that, you know, you worry about the Hobey Baker. Look at past Hobey Baker winners other than Cole Cauffield, of course. It's not always the creme de la creme. There are some guys that fizzled out. It doesn't mean much. I think Michael Hage is happier with the Big Ten championship and the opportunity to be to the top seed in the NCAA championship tournament, which starts Friday, than being a maybe win the Hobey Baker. Though I do think that there are other candidates that are a little bit more deserving at this time, including one Ethan Wittenbach.
I want to talk about the Montreal Canadiens 3 pairs on defense here. As always, one of our VIP members who's been with the show arguably since day one, Rod Langway Fan Club. Dom Lucian in The Athletic had their NHL awards update, and the Montreal Canadiens were populated all over the place, with Nick Suzuki right now as the front runner over Yanni Gourde of the Lightning for the Selke Award. Lane Hutson, Marco, was 4th in the projections for the Hart Trophy. Ivan Demidov well up there on the Calder for Rookie of the Year. As Rod asked, is Nick Suzuki the front runner for the Selke, or does his lack of PK minutes knock him down a few pegs? Is it his trophy to lose today?
I think so.
I think so.
We talked about it earlier this season, but I think so. I think, you know, it's a PWHA vote, right? So the Professional Hockey Writers Association is the voting body on this award. And I think everyone's kind of smart enough to see that the only reason that Nick Suzuki isn't getting PK time is because Martin St. Louis doesn't want to play him 26 minutes a game.
Right.
It's literally a management thing. Even Doug Armstrong, in his explanation as to why he selected Nick Suzuki for Team Canada, pointed out that it wasn't from a lack of ability that Nick Suzuki doesn't play 2 to 3 minutes on the penalty kill. It's because if he plays on the penalty kill, Jake Evans, Phil Deneau, and Oliver Kapanen are going to end up playing 10, 12 minutes a game, and he's going to end up playing 26 because he's used profusely on the power play and, you know, to Herculean levels at 5-on-5. And especially when the Canadiens are down a goal at 6-on-5, where he'll spend 2.5 to 3 minutes in the last 5 minutes of the game on the ice defending the lead. So it's not a capacity issue. It's a deployment issue. And this is, you can make the same kind of argument that fans are saying, oh, why don't you put out Cole Cauffield when the net's empty so that he can stat pad and get a couple of empty net goals so he can keep pace with McKinnon. Well, like, I think the same applies on the penalty kill. The only time the Canadiens really started giving Suzuki penalty kill time is when there were injuries in the lineup and Alex Newhook went down with an injury, or there was a moment in time where Newhook and Anderson were out of the lineup at the same time and Nick Suzuki was getting regular shifts. Like, he's still about a minute of PK time on average, but part of the best 5-on-5 line in hockey. They're one of the best defensive lines in hockey. To me, killing penalties is but one option, one aspect of defense. But if the 5-on-5 play, which makes up 85% of your total minutes, is impeccable defensive play, then are we talking about the best defensive forward in the league, right? Because I think we can all understand that if you can play exceptional defense at 5-on-5, rule of thumb is you could probably play good defense at 5-on-4 as well, right? And so this is where I see the argument going. I agree with Dom. I think that it does hurt him. And if, Sasha Barkov were playing and on pace and close to about 80, 90 points, given his impact on the penalty kill as well, he would probably get the nod accordingly. But because Nico Hischier is not having a really good season, and Florida is really starting to let a lot of goals in, which I believe kind of takes Reinhart out of the mix as well. Marner is not having a really strong season defensively with Vegas. I think that they have no choice but to overlook the fact that he's not consistently on the power play. I believe Nick Suzuki wins the Selke. I honestly, if I got to vote on it, he'd have my vote.
It's interesting you talk about Suzuki over 21 minutes, over 4 minutes on the power play, and not a bad penalty kill for the 27th ranked shorthanded unit in the NHL after Slafkovsky on a long, lengthy shift dumps it over to Glass for a delay of game penalty. Unbelievable kill for the Montreal Canadiens as they were holding on to that 3-2 lead, and Carolina comes in with a pretty decent power play. But a huge moment in that game as the Canadiens beat the Hurricanes 5-2. Unusual, isn't it? We're talking about a Canadiens team, Marco, that scored 12 goals over their last 2 games, and Lane Hutson left both games with 0 points.
Sorry, it skipped as you asked the question.
0 points for Lane Hutson for his team that scored 12 combined goals in 2 games.
That's a really good point. One of the reasons for that is because you're seeing Caden Gooley and Alex Carrier play with the first line, and Lane Hutson is actually being deployed with the third and fourth line because we talked about this. They haven't really been producing much offense. So they're throwing Lane Hutson with their 2 lower scoring lines to try and start something and try to get some offense going. Yeah, it's come at the expense of Lane Hutson's stats over the last 3 games. But what concerns me more is they've given that responsibility to Lane Hutson, and the turnovers are increasing accordingly. The suicide plays are increasing accordingly because he's trying so much to put the 4 other players on the ice on his back to try and create offense, because the rest of them aren't really making anything happen.
Bro, that toe drag in the first period that sprung Taylor Hall in a breakaway, my goodness, what are you doing?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think I think mixing and matching a little bit with the lines is maybe something that could help a little bit more. I get so? Yeah, but you look at last night, the reason why Caden Gooley and Alex Carrier were paired together with the top line is because the top line was being put out against Sebastian Aho's line, which is the #1 line for Carolina. So they were being put out there in a shutdown / produce offense capacity, which they did beautifully. But then you have Lane Hutson going out there with Phil Deneau's line. With respect to all 3 players out there at forward, the most dangerous player on the ice is Lane Hutson.
So what are we talking about? Hudson Dobson?
Well, there were instances where you saw Hudson Dobson when there was an offensive zone face-off, and I like that strategy. But I'd like to see Martin St. Louis kind of mix it up a little bit at 5-on-5 on the rush, on the fly changes, where it's not that Hudson is stuck with some of these guys on the 3rd and 4th line. That being said, it's also a mark of confidence from your coach that he would hope that you elevate those guys. That's what good players do. So the only thing that you could ask of Lane Hutson is to maybe elevate those guys without making the crazy dangerous plays. Because I think that's where he tries to do too much, makes a mistake, and then for whatever reason, the winger or Struble isn't back in time to cover for a pinching Lane Hutson. And then obviously Hutson looks terrible when there's a breakaway that goes the other way. So that's why I'm saying you have to temper a little bit. I think they're galaxy braining a little bit right now to try and counter certain teams and outcoach certain teams. But you got to give Martin St. Louis credit. He outcoached Rob Brind'Amour yesterday.
I mean, there was so much talk, and I see a couple of people point this out here. You know, a lot of people asking about who are the Canadiens going to move in the summer. We're going to have plenty of time to like dissect that and look at the options and explore all those options. But in the here and now, 12 games to go, the push for the playoffs is on in a big way, and that has our attention. But I think things have calmed down because there was a lot of chatter right before, I guess, Struble came in and you know, has been playing 5 straight games, and it looks like things are a little bit more stable. Goalie back on a strong side again with Alex Carrier.
But Hutson on the strong side.
I agree,
no,
but
it's not by chance.
Are you thinking then that it hasn't cooled down, that, you know, before games 80, 81, 82, are Reinbacher and Engstrom still an option today? Is that worth discussing, or it's let Laval kind of finish up and let them go? The Canadiens are guy with their 6 guys.
I don't think there's a need to call them up. If they want to give them a cup of coffee at the end of the season once they've clinched, no problem.
Different
do
story.
What you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But after that, you know, like why remove them from there other than to test them? But if you can give them that test at the end of the season, there's no sense in rushing them in right now because you already have Arbor Jackai sitting in the stands as your 7th defenseman. So who are you going to take out of the lineup in that sense? And why would you do that in the way that they're playing? Look, I'm not a fan of the way that Alex Carrier has played of late, but there is a big jump in the caliber of hockey that you see in the American Hockey League right now to what you're seeing in the NHL in the last 10 games of the season. And I always put a little bit of caution. You may think that Alex Carrier is a dumpster fire in his own end. That's your opinion. I think that there's a little bit more gray in that evaluation. But it won't be pretty if you bring up Reinbacher or Engstrom and they don't look good and then are sent down with more questions than answers than when they were called up.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
That's where I'm kind of, you want to put young players in the right situations. And I think that's where I'm at right now.
And it's, you know, and we spoke about it, you know, Marco joins yours truly and Connor McKenna every Wednesday at 8 on TSN 690 for Habs Breakfast, talking about the puzzle and the complicated task at hand of figuring out, you know, the Canadiens roster moving forward. Arbor Jackey's are RFA at the end of the season. Same with Kirby Dach, and you got Engstrom and Reinbacher come up. And what's going to happen? You know, how are they going to figure this all out? As Marco mentioned, Arbor Jackey again sitting. I saw there was a photo going around of the press box with the guys there, Montembeault and Jackey. Chris Nyland was sitting next to Arbor Jackey, and but the way Jaden Struble has been playing, for me, I mean, there's no reason, you know, for any of the games coming up that Arbor Jackey kind of takes his place. I like Struble's maneuverability. He makes some good decisions at the blue line, dodges checks, puts pucks to the net, makes things happen. I think, to me, that is a big separating point between why Struble stayed in and why Jackey, I think, has a hard time staying in. Marco getting called out, flip-flopping on bringing up Reinbacher every week, says Leo.
Yeah, I know.
Get him.
I've said this before and I've said it again. They have 4 call-ups. I've enunciated which of those players they could be in terms of the timing, in terms of when they can call them up. I'm simply answering the questions of fans as to, can they call him up? Will he be called up? But my 2 cents, clinch and then call them up unless there's an injury or unless there's an absolute need to play them. Because you have other players that could play right now, right? Mm-hmm. Unless there's a need, unless you want to evaluate where they're at in their development. Those would be the reasons. But you can do that at the end of the season as well once you've clinched and there's no problem. And that has been my take since the very beginning. I don't care if they call up David Reinbacher. I don't care if they call up Adam Engstrom. It doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. But here are the reasons why they could be called up. And that's what I've done since the beginning.
Yeah. I guess now it's my turn to get called out with that thinking. You can call me Shaun. Jackey shouldn't have been taken out of the lineup. As I mentioned before, and I stand by this, I got nothing personal against Arbor Jackey, But I mean, I don't even think there's a debate. I don't think Arbor Jacki could play with Lane Hutson the way Jaden Struble plays with Lane Hutson. And in terms of the maneuverability, as I mentioned, to evade someone on him inside the blue line as he keeps the puck in, that's just my opinion. You're obviously here to provide yours, and I respect that, no doubt. I demand a dance when we clinch a play. I ain't dancing. I'm no trained monkey, Jason. I'm not dancing for you, baby. That's not happening.
I mean, you're not going to dance for him, but you made that pose on the couch at Morella's, no problem.
Correct. And apparently that was the end of it. You know, we thank Morella's.
You got us canceled
on the Starr and D'Amico show. I love that.
This is a good question I would like to get into. Why are you guys still doubting Kapanen's ceiling? Mainly because I'm that high on his floor.
Yeah.
Again, like you look at the way that Kapanen plays. Look at the way he scores goals. Look at the way the plays come about with him. Has Ivan Demidov gotten a rub from playing with Kapanen? Like no,
it's the other way. Yeah.
Has any of the 15 goals that Demidov has scored come from a brilliant play from Oliver Kapanen?
Yeah.
So the only
and who drives the line? Kapanen
doubt,
hasn't shown you can drive the line.
Yeah. The only thing I'm saying here is this is a guy that's probably going to finish with about between 35 to 40 points this season, which is very respectable. But to assume that a player that was drafted 6 years ago, so he's 24 at the end of this calendar year, is going to be your second line center when he doesn't drive play. It's a difficult task to ask of a player,
Agreed.
Especially when you look at it. I think he's a center all day, every day. I think
agree.
He's an absolute center.
Yeah.
But I think that's the kind of player that the way that he plays, the way that he thinks the game is more suited for a third line with second wave power play minutes on a regular basis. If the Canadiens are going to contend, you're going to want a player that's far closer to performance in terms of offensive play driving to that of Nick Suzuki than where Kapanen is. Can Kapanen improve? Absolutely. We've seen it with other players in the past. The only thing I would say is it's habits and it's the way they go about constructing hockey plays in their minds. Kapanen is a finisher, but to be a top 6 center in this NHL, you need to be a dual threat. And we just haven't seen the duality of that threat when it comes to playmaking and driving the offense with his mind. And I'm not saying he's a dumb player by any stretch. I'm just saying he doesn't have the vision of an Ivan Demidov or a Juraj Slafkovsky.
You know, I don't regret the Canadiens' decision to re-up with Jake Evans, but boy, would I love to see Oliver Kapanen be the third line center and eventually grow into that role. He's so smart. I mean, the coaches praised him throughout the course of the season for how he thinks through the game. I totally believe, you know, when the day comes, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, I think he would be an upgrade on Jake Evans as this Canadiens team opens up their window of Stanley Cup contention.
He already is.
Right. Okay, so there's an argument there, right? I mean, in just that ability. So yeah, I mean,
think so.
And what does that mean for Owen Beck in the future? I mean, are they looking at the future of Suzuki, ? Kapanen, Owen Beck as the 3 right now centers
Florian
of the
Jacki.
Canadiens' future? Florian Jacki?
Say, like, that's the whole point that I'm trying to get at, right? Where if you have Oliver Kapanen in the 3-seat chair, you're cooking with gasoline, because then the player that's in your 2-seat chair has to be better than Kapanen, which means it's going to be a really good player. And that puts you in a situation where you're really kind of able to go in there and be a 3-line offensive team. And you look at, you know, the way that the games have gone of late, especially with Kapanen. Like, I'm floored by the way that he's able to find soft ice and play, but you're going to need that overall style of play when it comes time to being able to execute in those elements. And, you know, like, I looked at Ivan Demidov right now, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 primary assists, right? In terms of the way he's impacted Oliver Kapanen's game. And then you go and look at how some of those plays happen. Like, the goal that Kapanen scored against Columbus, where Ivan Demidov had a secondary assist, but that was the play that made that goal. Like Mike Matheson may have had the primary assist, but he was the body that just made the quick pass over to Kapanen. The play was made by Ivan Demidov, and we've seen this time and time again in the past, where a lot of the plays happen because of the ice that Ivan Demidov opens up.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest, that's to me is the biggest reason why I talk about Ivan Demidov and the impact that he's had on Kapanen, because I don't feel like it's reciprocal in that sense. I think that Demidov is getting a lot of his 5-on-5 scoring. A lot of it comes from his own effort and play, individual play, or, you know, being able to pad those stats by being on the top power play unit with Caufield, Suzuki, Slafkovsky, and Lane Hutson.
This one from Frankie McCumber. Is it fair to say Struble and Hutson in the future can be a Lindell and Heiskanen type of duo?
I don't think so. I think if the Canadiens are to contend, they're going to need, with respect to Jaden Struble, and they tried, but I think they're going to need to upgrade on that front.
NSA goes, for those building up Struble, please explain. He's playing way too deep to play with Hutson. Have you noticed that in every game there's a breakaway? Guess who's on the ice? I noticed on the breakaway what Struble's partner did on that play that resulted in Taylor Hall trying to make it 2-0 and an unbelievable stop by Jakub Dobes. But Marco, you want to tackle this on Struble's situational play when he's out there with Hutson?
Listen, the thing with Jaden Struble is his mobility, the way the safe play, the neutral zone impact, the way he's able to, not complicate his game. I just feel like some of the parts have more of an overall impact to the style that the Canadiens want to play. If y'all are trying to insinuate that the reason why Lane Hutson is playing poorly is because he's being paired with Jaden Struble specifically, I've got Ocean View property in Nevada to sell you.
Oh, lovely.
What I would say more along those lines is the forward lines that Lane Hutson is being matched up with are kind of, and we all know that Lane takes this upon himself. He told me as such. He takes a lot of that responsibility onto himself, tries to do too much, and then gets caught. And you could blame playing on his offside. That I'm with you 100%. And it speaks to what I said before. The Canadiens will be looking to rebalance their defensive core in the summer. They tried to bring in a right shot defenseman. I've spoken to you about this before on the show. That deal just it fell through before the trade deadline came in. So there's not much you can do with a failed trade. So I will say that. The other element to keep into consideration, Jaden Struble isn't the one forcing Lane Hutson to make the decisions that he's making in the offensive zone that are resulting in all those turnovers. He's not. It's not like his passing is putting a guy like they're aiming for someone higher than White Cloud Surf. They're not looking to, what's the word here? Jaden Struble's not putting Lane Hutson in bad spots. Lane Hutson trying to do too much is putting Lane Hutson in bad spots. And Lane Hutson being matched up against with non-offensive players and trying to take that offensive responsibility onto himself is what's also allowing for this kind of turnovers. What I would say is, knowing that Lane Hutson is going to be taking those chances, there needs to be better communication between Struble and Hutson so that Struble significantly curls back into the neutral zone so that they don't have breakaways against. That, in my opinion, I think is what they're looking for.
On to Columbus, as we mentioned before. Personally, if it were up to me, I'd go back to Jakub Dobes. I mean, it was 41 saves, for Dobes. And he's got to be close. I should have looked this up. Carey Price's record for rookie wins. I know he's past Patrick Waugh now. But he's having a phenomenal season. Win number 23 for Dobes. But I mean, Marco, I mean, there was some big time saves, but it wasn't a barrage of high danger scoring opportunities, right? I mean, is there concern about the workload going into tomorrow night against Columbus at the Bell Center?
I wouldn't have a worry about it.
No,
because
Ça va?
he last played on Thursday last week, right?
Yeah.
And then Fowler played Saturday. And then he played this Tuesday. Am I correct?
That sounds right.
Yeah. So he had 4 days off. And then he has today off. And then if he plays tomorrow, he'll have 3 days off until Sunday. So I don't see a problem with it at all.
And he played Thursday last week, just to round out your point. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, there's enough balance of rest and play, but at this stage of the season, you got to win your games. You got to win them, and you put your. I'm not saying ride him until the end.
Yeah,
but at the same time, I also feel like you have to keep Jacob Fowler in the loop, and you have to keep him playing as well. So there's a rest/performance strategy involved, and that's the reason why I would go to Dobes, and then give him the 3 days off after that. Have Fowler in on Saturday, and go back to Dobes in the harder game against Carolina in the second of a back-to-back.
Marco, can I just end on this? I want to mention it before I get into it. Screw the Ottawa Senators, but also I'm kind of impressed, man, with what they're doing. Lassie Thompson out, Thomas Chabot out, Jake Sanderson out. They're getting these call-ups. They're getting these unbelievable performances, Marco. I mean, Ottawa has climbed to the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference. I mean, pretty impressive to watch this team kind of operate. And I mean, with the injuries that they've suffered and what they're doing, been pretty impressive, man.
It's crazy what happens when you get decent goaltending.
Isn't that right? Allmark
Reimer
with
finally
8 saves against the Rangers. Shame on you, New York, with 9 shots on goal.
Yeah. Canadiens fans kind of hope for a repeat performance when they're playing New York next week. But I think with Ottawa, give them credit, but at the same time, I do feel like these injuries are going to catch up with them.
That's it.
They play teams that didn't take them seriously, and Allmark stole that game against Detroit. He really did. So are they going to keep getting lucky? Because obviously beating the Rangers is one thing, but they also have Buffalo coming up on their schedule. They also have Tampa coming up on their schedule.
Correct.
This is the thing. The Canadiens play the least amount of Atlantic Division teams. They mostly play Metro Division teams here on out, right? Columbus, Carolina, New York, Devils, Columbus again, the Islanders, the Flyers. Right off the bat, I just named you 7 of their last, 11 games are against Metro Division teams. So this is why I'm saying, like, the rest of the Atlantic is going to fight it out. And that might be beneficial to the Canadiens if those games don't go to overtime.
Agreed. We'll see who hangs on. Boston going to hang on. The New York Islanders, what's going to happen with the Detroit Red Wings, who are on the 1 point out of a playoff spot? They've been bad. There's a team that hasn't been able to deal with injuries, right? They get caught back, but still haven't been able to do anything without Dylan Larkin. Well,
they got Dylan Larkin back, and he got robbed twice in the last minute by Allmark. So again, the thing is that when you play over your head at this stage of the season, it's fun, but the law of averages sometimes catches up to you.
Always.
So
yes,
that's why, as long as the Canadiens continue to play their game and to do their thing, the Canadiens' time to feast is next week.
Correct.
Next week, they play the Rangers and the Devils twice.
Yep.
So that if they come out of those games, if they get the 6 points there, they'll have given themselves the necessary cushion to be in a playoff spot.
Because I thought, honestly, when we previewed this week with 4 games on tap, I was like, what's a satisfactory result? I was like,
6 points.
I had 5. I had 5 as a satisfactory result.
Yeah, 5 is like the baseline. For the Canadiens to stay in this race, they absolutely need 5 of 8 this week.
Yeah. Well, 2's in the bank. On to Columbus tomorrow, and we'll be here to recap it as always. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget, members will get an early preview of our video coming out as we talk about what's going on with Michael Hage after the James Hagan decision with the Boston Bruins. We'll dig into that. Members get a look at it first. It'll be released nationwide on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Always wanted to say that. So that's done. Thanks as always to our
Why
sponsors.
nationwide? We have worldwide now.
We
have fans that are watching us from all over the world, as we know.
There's Pitbull, Mr. Worldwide. Thank you very much. That's well said. I should be more confident.
Should I go and get sunglasses and I could just be Pitbull, or are we just going to keep the Professor D'Amico going?
And then I'll put the comment on. You got to dance. I think you got to put the glasses on. We got to let the Chrome Dome shine, and you got to be Mr. Worldwide when the Canadiens make the playoffs, brother.
Listen, I will not, no offense, ladies and gentlemen, I will not cheer for the Canadiens making the playoffs, but I will watch you guys cheer, and I'll be happy to see you guys happy about it.
I'll be cheering. Bet your bottom dollar I'll be cheering. Cheapesttshirts.com, Insta Customs, McLean's, Cabletel, and LittleBearOnline.com with their spring savings are the best sponsors on the best show. That's Starr and D'Amico right here. Thank you, everybody, for spending 65 minutes with us. Looking forward to our Friday show as the Montreal Canadiens look to, once again, play another strong home game. We'll be here to recap it all. All right, Marco, thanks, brother.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Thank you all for following, and we'll be back at you tomorrow with a really fun video.